Monkey D. Dragon, who not only put fear into the hearts of the government, but also literally controls the tide of the world with his god fruit of the mythical deity Amaru.
Ain't no way, boy.
With the revelation of the goddesses' mythical demon god fruits, the idea of legendary deities and their oppositions being zone fruits is solidified. If Sengoku's Buddha fruit wasn't enough, then this sure is. But to understand what Dragon's abilities are and how he even obtained them, we have to start at the very beginning, going back 55 years from the current story. Dragon was born in the Goa Kingdom of the East Blue to his father, Monkey D. Garp, and an unknown woman. Now, there are many speculations stating this woman was a celestial dragon, or at least related to them. This notion is driven from dragon embodying the name and also being a bane to their existence, along with his story having some relations to the mythical deity Wayu. This is further reinforced as it is highly indicated that the Goa Kingdom is actually where one of the 20 allied nations originated from, much like Dressrosa and Arabasta, which mind you is very similar to Goa as respectively pointed out by Sabo and Luffy. Along with the commonalities between these kingdoms, the biggest clue was, of course, the fact that Saint Jalmak, a celestial dragon, went out of his way to pay tribute to visit this very island. So, a young Garp falling in love with a celestial dragon or even Jalmak's relative is plausible. Regardless, what we do know is that Dragon grew up without his father, as Garp at the age of 22 had joined the Marines a year before his own son's birth. Being brought up in Goa, Dragon had the misfortune to witness the atrocities of the royalties and the upper echelons towards the bottom feeders. He had hoped that one day things would change. However, as he points out later, it hadn't. Now from here to Dragon as a revolutionist, we have yet to fully uncover his past, but oh wait, what? Oda?
Two hours later.
Oda-sensei? Oh, ohayo gozaimasu. Are you saying that you want me to share Dragon's past with the Balls Deep community? Okay. Throughout Dragon's upbringing, Garp would venture back home once in a while to visit his family and implant the idea in becoming a Marine, much like he does later on with Ace and Luffy. However, unlike them, Dragon followed Garp's tutelage and at the age of 17 joined the Navy. This was during Garp's prime years of 39, where he gained great status and had already marked his biggest challenge in Rocks D. Zebek, where a year later the world would flip on its head for Monkey D. Dragon. At the age of 18, Dragon had positioned himself under his father's ship advancing towards God Valley to stop the mayhem and destruction declared by Zebek's 20 billion berry crew. Here, Garp would fight a threat like no other, but he wouldn't do this alone. He had the help of his friend Roger. However, his son's presence wasn't a joke either. We have to remember, Dragon's age is not too different to what we see of Kobe and Luffy in the current era. His arrival to God Valley introduced him to many notorious characters from Rocks, Whitebeard, Big Mom, Kaido, Shiki, Roger, Rayleigh, so on and so forth. But moving past who Dragon fought in God Valley, we come to what Dragon learned, because this knowledge would change his goals and motivations in life forever. Set the scene, boys. As stormy waves engulf the West Blue, Marines finally land on the island of God Valley, where just a day earlier had hosted the once in 3 year tournament, a culling by the Celestial Dragons to hunt the citizens of a non-government affiliated island to determine the strongest amongst the participants. Witnessing this event made Dragon see everything wrong with the world. He first-hand saw the darkness and the thin facade of free will whilst being oppressed by the Celestial Dragons, even at the highest caste order. The same prejudice and classism is present which he witnessed as a child in the Goa Kingdom. Like, what crime did this nation have apart from having the name God Valley, which narcissistically was taken as an insult and challenged by the celestial dragons? At that moment, Dragon understood that himself and the people of the world are nothing but insects to those who rules them. From annihilating an entire island's population for sports to enslaving countless innocents to kill at their pleasure, the epitome of the government's corruption was on full display to him with the Celestials' culling game. However, with the prizes being 6 of the rarest and strongest devil fruits on the sea, Zebek's crew attacked this island, declaring war on the celestial dragons. Rox was there to pillage and get rid of these heinous criminals who make others suffer, whilst the code of the Marines that Dragon wore saw Rox as the criminal. In his heart, the real villains stood right behind him. Though he was a pirate, Rox was just getting rid of dirt from the world. Like we all know, Zebek's crew joined up together for a similar goal of overthrowing the government. For example, Whitebeard's island was constantly attacked by pirates as they couldn't afford to pay the heavenly tribute and hence got zero protection from the government, or in Kaido's case, being sold to the government for his strength and race as a child. The Marines, whilst boasting about justice and peace throughout the world, were neglecting these islands because they were poor. So Rox claiming to usher a new era of peace to the world without discrimination must have been tantalizing to Dragon. However, this tall dream of Zebek had an issue. He wanted to be the king of this new world. But Rox, as a pirate, wasn't an ideal candidate to realize this dream, as evident by one of the islands he did rule in Fullerled, where the stronger pirates oppressed the weaker ones and was lawless with no protection for the helpless. However, not only did Dragon get his ideologies questioned at God Valley, but he also met the core members of the Revolutionary Army here in Kuma, Ivankov and Ginny. The story behind these founding members tells us a lot, not only of Dragon but the revolutionaries as a whole, where Dragon aided these former slaves from the clutches of the Celestials at God Valley, showcasing the humanity he feels for them. Unlike other Marines who only follow orders and turn a blind eye to these horrible actions, Dragon was different. He doesn't believe that these so-called gods are above everyone else. Nothing gives anyone the right to oppress others like this. That is the core belief Dragon holds. However, with Dragon helping these slaves, he gained a greater perspective on how the world works, especially from Kuma, who told him about the legend of Nika, who will bring the dawn to the world. This resonated with Dragon, who comes from Dawn Island and left following his father's footstep with the purpose to liberate his people and change everything. In the midst of chaos, we see 6 devil fruit boxes laid out as prizes for the winners of the Celestial Tournament. Since this contest was between the Celestials, the only meaningful thing they could win would have been an overpowered devil fruit. As being Celestials, they have almost all of their needs met. This theme was later adopted by Doflamingo, who kept this tournament practice alive in Dressrosa, offering an extremely rare devil fruit himself, being, the Mirabin no Mi. But in God Valley, amongst these prizes held the fruits that later bore the blue dragon in the Yonko Kaido, along with many other overpowered broken fruits, such as Kuma's Pawpaw fruit, which he quickly ate in order to escape God Valley with Ginny and Ivankov. But Dragon found himself upon a mythical Zoan as well. Instead of a beast, it was a deity. This fruit gravitated towards as though it was meant for him. Like other Zoans, it has a will of its own, and found the perfect user in Monkey D. Dragon. This god fruit was inspired by South American deities, with Amaru being its primary model. In the Inca mythology, Amaru is a huge dragon serpent deity that dwells underground at the bottom of lakes and can be seen emerging from the gateway of the sun at Tiwakanu, Bolivia. This relays back to Dragon and how he too is the guardian for the gateway to the sun in Luffy, along with himself emerging from Dawn Island. Now, Amaru is also related to the underground, the earth, and earthquakes. According to the myths, the Amarus have protective or destructive behavior, similar to how Dragon is seen as a destructive force who lays hidden underground against the world government, whilst being the protective force for those who are oppressed. Like, just look at how the revolutionaries infiltrated Marijoa. They came from underground. Amaru also symbolizes storm, hail, wisdom, followed by a rainbow. This perfectly contrasts Dragon's power to control the weather, but amazingly, Amaru is primarily associated with the economy of water that irrigates the agricultural lands, symbolizing its vitality that allows the existence of the Aymara people. This again runs back to Dragon, who is trying to give life to the normal people with his revolution, and every time he enters a place, rain or storm will follow. Dragon represents the rain pouring down on the people as they are the plants, and Luffy is the sun who will complete this cycle of giving them life. Some other related deities that link back to Dragon are also Iappa and Waira, who respectively represents lightning and wind. But since Oda is known to amalgamate different cultures, laws, and concepts together, the Hindu deity Vayu comes to mind. This is backed up through the idea of Japan's 12 guardians of direction, which are based on Hindu deities named the Juniten. Amongst these deities, we see a familiar name, Futen, the guardian of the northwest, who in Hinduism is the wind deva Vayu. So knowing that there is a crossover between these two mythologies is not surprising Oda was inspired by them, especially with Dragon getting his fruit in God Valley, which is in the West Blue, the same direction as Vayu. The Deva Vayu also has the power to manipulate wind and storm, which fits right in with everything we have seen about Dragon throughout his story. And let's not forget that Luffy is also linked to the Hindu deity Hanuman, who, funny enough, is also the son of Vayu. But coming back to the life of Dragon, the events of God Valley changed his perspective forever, especially after his father was given the title of the hero. The media and the government completely covered up the events of what actually happened. And Dragon, first-hand seeing the morally grey personalities from Roger, Whitebeard, to even from the Celestial Dragons, made him question everything, that nothing truly is black or white. So 5 years later, when Dragon hits 23 years old, he is still in the Marines, but has decided that it's time to make a change. This is when the future admirals in Akainu and Kizaru join the Navy. We know these admirals and Dragon have a connection through the Chinese myth where 3 animals and a white dragon protects the sea. The animals were the red dog, Akainu, blue pheasant in Kuzan, and the yellow monkey in Kizaru. They served an evil king, being Imusama and the world government, and only the white dragon noticed the king's atrocities, so the dragon left. Just like the myth, the dragon in our case already has seeds of doubt in his heart after witnessing the events at God Valley and many other countless cruel acts committed in the name of justice. However, unlike Dragon, the other 3 admirals had created their own sense of justice to play along. Out of these, the main one who directly links to Dragon is of course Akainu. Although they held similar positions in the Marines, with even their age matching, they both are walking different paths. Akainu gave up control of his will to the Celestials and the government to achieve his absolute justice, whilst Dragon took full control of his fate by starting his own opposing force. These two have been linked together since day one. The question remains on whether Dragon will end up fanning the heat of Akainu, or will his storm cool it down. 2 years later, Dragon at the age of 25 would have been introduced to the future Admiral Kuzan. Though likely the two never had much interactions, Kuzan still had a deep admiration for his father in Garp and idolized him due to rejecting the post of Admiral time and time again. However, within the next 5 years, Dragon would leave the Navy to form his liberation cause. Next time we see him is at the age of 31, where he was at Roger's execution wearing a cloak, hinting at the fact that the government was already after him, so he had to stay hidden. Which is of course because Dragon had become the captain of the freedom fighters, a small poor military organization, leading him to eventually meet Vegapunk. Dragon instantly tried to rizz up the doctor, but with his giant ass head and his knowledge that is 500 years into the future, Vegapunk was smart enough to know that these broke ass mother can't help him make anything, so he chose to decline the offer. However, that didn't mean they were on the opposing sides, as 2 years later, right after the Ohara incident, when Dragon is 33 years old, he meets Vegapunk once again. This meeting is on a fateful day, a few months after the entirety of Ohara had been eradicated, with the exception of some law books which were thrown into the lake and were being retrieved by giants from Albath, which Dragon was okay with, letting us know that he had some good relations with them. But the reason Dragon came to Ohara was due to his acquaintance with Dr. Clover, and had come to witness the devastation and pay his respects to his friends, hinting to us that Dragon at some level is familiar with the true history of the world and what the Void Century was all about. However, up until this point, although in command of a small military organization, Dragon hated violence and had disdain for the law of the world, where it was a crime to ask questions. But the Ohara incident had a profound impact on him. It completely changed his views on what his freedom fighters needed to do in order to turn the world upside down. So he claims to Vegapunk that the only way he can win is by creating a full-on military force which can fight back, so that another Ohara incident won't ever occur, leading him to create a brand new force called the Revolutionary Army alongside Kuma and Ivankov. Also, after starting the Revolutionary Army, Dragon got his infamous face tattoo, which he was already wearing as patches during the freedom fighting days, but now this symbol of revolution was etched onto his body, signifying a change in attitude towards his goal. This decision by Dragon to fight back also prompted Garp to be even more annoyed with his son, where now he had taken Kuzan under his wing and frequently complained about his family to his student. But Garp could do nothing to stop his son's ideas spreading throughout the world and capturing the hearts of many oppressed islands one by one. This eventually made Dragon the world's worst criminal, as he was committing the greatest sin against the government by threatening the chokehold of power and information they have on the world. Essentially, Dragon was making people believe in his ideals rather than the government's propaganda. 3 years later, at the age of 36, Dragon met a baddie who was so bad that he stopped everything he was doing and got her pregnant, giving birth to Monkey D. Luffy. Now, this might seem like a very weird thing to do, like right after losing his friends, including Professor Clover, should have made Dragon wary to settle down, especially after declaring war against the world government. From a simple ragtag militia, he went full throttle and formed the Revolutionary Army. But Dragon still made time to go to the East Blue and make a family.
That doesn't make no sense.
Mind you, this was under the noses of even his closest friends. Ivankov, Kuma, nobody knew about this. In fact, Luffy's mother still remains a mystery even till this day, where there are many theories on who she is, from the previous empress of the Amazon Lily to Crocodile to even now Ginny. However, she is either dead or could not be part of Luffy's life due to some circumstance. So as the Monkey D tradition, Dragon went to get milk, leaving his son alone in his father's care. Though, unlike Garp, Dragon refrained from meeting him throughout his life. 12 years later, at the age of 48, Dragon returned back to his home of East Blue right on time to witness the burning of Grey Terminal, which wasn't by luck, as with a celestial dragon soon coming to Goa Kingdom, Dragon knew that the nobles and the aristocracy of the nations would pull something despicable, because that's how the kingdom is. Grey Terminal was a mountain of garbage that they had gathered, but for the less fortunate, it was the only place where they could find shelter and call it home. The upper classes of the Goa Kingdom thought that burning the trash would be a good way to eliminate two birds with one stone. They didn't want to tell those living in the Grey Terminals to evacuate because they wanted to burn them like the rest of the trash. That's why Dragon says that the Goa Kingdom is like a miniature version of the world. Unwanted things are discarded. It's exactly why the world government erases whatever is inconvenient for their system of power and oppression, like the incident of Ohara. When Dragon saw all of this go down, he would also meet Sabo, who was so angry at what the aristocracy of Goa Kingdom were doing that he felt ashamed of his own lineage. But despite that, there will still be children who are born in a birdcage like Sabo, where they'll be molded into continuing the cycle of discrimination and corruption. This is highlighted with his adoptive brother Steady. The only difference between Sabo and the other noble kids is that he was aware of his lack of freedom in this country. He understood that as long as he lived as he was told to, following a narcissistic ideology, as a noble, he would be suffocated and never really be free, which is similar to how Dragon felt fighting for the Celestials in the name of the Marines. So Dragon, with the wind of change, blew through the flames and offered the people who had seen the world's true ugliness hope in the form of the Revolutionary Army. Dragon would also save Sabo from certain death after being moved by the kid's words. However, due to Sabo's injuries, he would not remember anything except for the fact that he did not want to go back no matter what. After adding Sabo to the ranks, the revolutionary docks at Shimutsuki village to resupply. Turns out Zoro-sensei Kyoshiro was empathetic to the revolutionaries' cause, as he gave them food to return to Baltigor in the Grand Line.
After 5 more years of preparation, Dragon at 53 years old would finally make an appearance into the story. Walking through the streets of Logtown, he's accompanied by Rain and Storm as he ponders and approves of Luffy's decision to pursue his career as a pirate. Unlike Garp, who had been very hands-on with his grandchildren, wanting to make them into Marines at any cost, Dragon left Luffy to his own devices, which is what he wants to do with every island in the world, giving them the choice to choose their own fate. By being hands-off with Luffy, Dragon ensured that his son didn't grow up in a birdcage, being forced to live up to some kind of predetermined duty, something that Dragon felt like he was forced to go through. However, even though Dragon didn't enforce his ideas on his son, this didn't stop him from aiding Luffy. As if it weren't for Daddy, Luffy's story would have ended right there on the execution platform at Logtown. But Dragon said no, and for the first time, he showed us his true power. With the sword millimeters away from Luffy's neck, a giant bolt of lightning strikes Buggy's blade, where the only one uninjured is Luffy because, well, he's made of rubber, revealing to us that Dragon knows more about Luffy than he lets on. His help doesn't stop there though, as he guides his son to go west by following his wind, which is the direction that is left unguarded by the Marines, which causes Smoker to question whether or not this is a coincidence, because it's as though there is some kind of force trying to make sure that the pirate survives. But Smoker ain't having none of this, so he vows to not let a single pirate leave the island and easily apprehends Luffy. However, his earlier hunch would be proven correct, as the world's greatest criminal would appear before him with 2 words that made one of the most busted and up-and-coming Marine freeze. Dragon blows away a horde of soldiers with ease, which his son gets swept up in as well, granting him yet another opportunity to escape thanks to his father's ability to control the weather. In fact, my guy Dragon was so ahead of the game that he stopped the Going Merry from being burnt by Buggy's crew with the rain. Bruh, Smoker must have been so flabbergasted. Imagine no diffing some pirate in the East Blue, the weakest sea, and boom, the leader of the Revolutionary Army, the most wanted man on earth, the world's worst criminal, appears just to help some random. But we all know the truth. None of the things that happened that day were a coincidence, despite Dragon not wanting to spill the beans to Smoker and only saying that the world awaits their answer, hinting that it is finally time for the revolutionaries to make a move. Whilst Dragon started moving his chess pieces, Luffy for the first time in his life learned of his father's existence after his global scale move in the events of Enies Lobby, and the person to spill the beans was none other than his grandfather Garp, which was actually prompted by Dragon himself. Dragon had finally contacted and talked with Garp, telling him that he saw his son off in Logtown, as we learn in chapter 432. Despite their vastly differing ideals, Dragon and his father Garp still seem to have a good relationship. Garp believes in the gradual change in the system from within the Navy and the world government so that it can truly stand one day as a force for good, hence his involvement with the Neo Marines and Sword. But Dragon, having seen some of the most despicable acts facts known to mankind, isn't able to believe in slow change and in the potential good that can come forth from that change. War, poverty, starvation, and slavery, these are all things that the world government has a constant hand in across the globe. The world cannot afford to wait for change to happen. Sadly, it is something you have to fight with all of your might for. This sheer desperation of wanting change is what led the war-hating dragon to transform his freedom fighters to a full-scale revolutionary army which aims to take down the world government itself. Basically, both Garp and Dragon want the same result in the end, but have different ways of achieving it. Garp then reveals Dragon's family name of Monkey D was purposefully censored by the government because they didn't want the world to know that the greatest criminal of their era has direct blood ties to the greatest hero of their era. Similar to how Roger had his name misspelled as Gold Roger rather than Gold D Roger. This was an attempt from the world government to hide how the D's were bringing an era of change to the world. And the location for this coming change was at the headquarters of the revolutionaries located in Baltigo. Through the use of Dragon's devil fruit, Baltigo had become the perfect hiding spot for his army. Given the sandy nature of the island, Dragon is able to create a veil for it using his power to control the weather, where the sandstorms keep people away and also make it hard to identify anything even with scouting technology. We then see a group of revolutionaries talk about their victory in the North Blue and are celebrating before Dragon sternly tells them not to, saying that there is nothing to rejoice in war, showcasing how Dragon after all these years has stayed to his core beliefs of being a hater of war and that the revolutionary army was not created lightly. No matter if the battle fought was won or lost, there are no winners in war, and Dragon knows that better than anyone. This is where he first hears of the news that his son had done something incredible. Although Luffy had no idea, he made his dad really proud by attacking Enies lobby and declaring war on the world government. And now that they are both treading upon the same perilous path, Dragon speaks out to the wind, relaying his message as he tells Luffy to live as he wishes. Because in history, it has taken people with luck, fate, and a strong will to make the masses question the world. Whilst Dragon had begun his ultimate plan to revolutionize the world, the core members of his army had spread to complete different missions of their own, one of whom was Ivankov, captured and impelled down but ready to escape at a moment's notice, because Ivankov's mission was clear: wait for Dragon's signal, until then recruit as many soldiers as possible. So he did exactly that. Within the harshest and most impenetrable prison in the One Piece world, Ivankov managed to form the Okama army. This strategy of going to a prison to look for comrades was a genius on Dragon's part, as it being the government's holding ground for outcasts and criminals of society, the prisoners were already against the government. So to recruit them to a cause that goes against the entity who took away their freedom was very simple. Also, not to mention the loyalty you get from giving these outcasts freedom and hope. And when fate had played its hand, Ivankov would meet Dragon's son, Monkey D. Luffy. After healing Luffy through the request of Bon Clay, Eva found out that Dragon was his father. He then assumed that Ace was also Dragon's son and came to the conclusion that the government did not know about their lineage. So Eva went with Luffy to save Ace. The main reason for this is, of course, the loyalty and admiration he feels towards Dragon, so he had to help out his sons. Also, Eva assumed that with his son captured and about to be executed in Ace, Dragon would show up to the war as well, so him helping Luffy is, in a way, aiding Dragon. Eva also gives us another hint towards Dragon's true power by stating that his wrath would be boundless, where Dragon could literally go toe-to-toe against the strongest of the government. However, despite the world-changing event that was the war in Marineford, Dragon had purposefully avoided his intervention even though several of his comrades were present. The war between Whitebeard and the Marines was very beneficial to the revolutionaries, where Marineford was completely destroyed with many of their trump cards like the pacifistas being exposed to the world. But during the war, the government finally revealed that Dragon's father was Garp and his son was Luffy. This came as a shock to the entire revolutionary army, as not many of them knew of Dragon's lineage, but this information did boost the notoriety of the revolutionaries, as their leader was directly linked to the hero of the Marines in Garp. Furthermore, after the war, Ivankov finally spoke to Dragon, where he informed the leader about Luffy and how much he is like his father. Dragon has a lot of parallels to Luffy when it comes to this savior complex. With Luffy, he goes to an island, befriends someone, and if they are in trouble, helps them out, freeing the people in the process. However, Dragon goes to islands causing revolutions not as a consequence of trying to save someone, but his whole objective is to liberate it. Even with Luffy saving the Straw Hats, like giving Robin a reason to live, is similar to what Dragon has done with the revolutionary members he gathers. But at this point, through Eva, Dragon and the revolutionaries learn of Kuma's fate, losing his mind and body to become nothing more than a mere robot. This was tragic news, as he was also an OG of the crew. Like, Ivankov had known him since God Valley. They were slaves together, and he's in this state. But they couldn't do anything at that moment, so the revolutionary army continued to go from nation to nation trying to liberate the oppressed kingdoms, finally reaching Tequila Wolf. This is when Dragon finds out that Tequila Wolf had a certain slave in their custody, being Nico Robin, the archaeologist of his son's crew and the one who had inherited the will of his good friend Dr. Clover from Ohara. So he seeks her out and spends 2 whole years with her. During their time together, Dragon must have learned everything about his son and especially the findings of the poneglyphs from Robin. Then 2 years later, at the age of 55, Dragon's 22-year plan with the revolutionaries finally starts to come to a climax where he sends Sabo, Koala, and Hack to Dressrosa so they can make a dent in Joker's underground trafficking ring and grab one of the strongest devil fruits in Ace's Mera Mera no Mi for Sabo from the Colosseum. The defeat of Doflamingo stopped a big portion of arms production in the black market, but this also gave the Revolutionary Army a lead on where these weapons were manufactured, but they weren't the only ones finding out information on a hidden location, as the Blackbeard pirates found out Baltigo and launched a surprise attack where shortly after it was destroyed by both the Marines and Cypherpole. However, the Revolutionary Army did not stutter, as they managed to escape the destruction of Baltigo and moved their base to Ivankov's Momorio Island. This would be the new gathering place that would initiate the war on Marishwa and the Celestial Dragons, the first step of which being to cause uprisings in kingdoms around the world where the royalties subjugated and wrongfully oppressed their nation. The prime example being Lulusia Kingdom, where the 4 generals of the revolutionaries assisted the people against pirates, and afterwards Sabo, Karasu, Lindenberg, and Morley infiltrated Marishwa to make a public statement of their power during the reverie, where the government wouldn't be able to keep an infiltration quiet with all the island leaders being present. But they were also there to save their friend Kuma, who had become a slave. During the reverie, the Revolutionary Army gained major wind, like they never imagined they would. The right-hand man of Dragon would be named the Flame Emperor after having the allegation of murdering King Cobra placed on him. Even though Sabo wasn't the one who killed Cobra, to the abused citizens of the many suffering islands, this was a showcase of power where there was a force in the world fighting for them and they made the world government bleed. For the first time in hundreds of years, true freedom away from the world government's rule seemed possible. But that wasn't the only thing Dragon gained from this raid on the Reverie. They also achieved the original goal of their raid, and that was the freeing and rescue of Kuma. And finally, they managed to cut the supply line to the Celestial Dragon's food. The raid was a massive success by every means, but Dragon is not happy because he knows the truth and to look further than just the surface, which is what separates him from the other leaders. Dragon knows that the King of Alabasta was not just innocent in this conflict, but rather someone who was a good man who truly cared for his people. King Cobra is the type of benevolent ruler that the world needs. The Revolutionary Army wouldn't exist if the world leaders were more like him. If Sabo truly did kill him, no matter the reason, then they'd be forsaking the very ideal that the Revolutionary Army started. Dragon then tried to talk to Kuma about what he had seen in Marishua to try and get to the bottom of this, where he complies by referring to Dragon as Master. Now, with Kuma being a slave for the Celestials for all this time, wouldn't his masters be them? So why is he referring to Dragon as one? Like, what? Does he see Dragon as having celestial blood? Is that why, like, he calls him his master and is only willing to listen to his orders? I think Oda might be cooking here, but someone else who also got cooked are the people of Lulusia Kingdom by Imu firing his Uranus weapon, which gave us all a heart attack when Oda made us and Dragon believe that Sabo was caught up in it too. But we all know they got teleported to the moon, right guys? But luckily, the second in command of the revolutionaries was just fine, and he returned concerned with the truth at the Reverie, where Sabo witnessed the devil on the empty throne of the world, Imu, and even saw the 5 Gorosei transform into their demon god zone forms, where he claimed this was a scene right out of hell. But with Sabo's escape, it means that the Revolutionary Army has the greatest card possible up their sleeves, being the 800-year-old secret the government hid from the world: the existence of a puppeteer in Imu D. Judas. The declaration of war against Celestials, along with their initial attack cutting off their food supply, will mean the Celestials will not sit still and send in the strongest force of them all, that being the God's Knights, which will be the matchup for the revolutionaries during the final war of One Piece. Dragon, in hearing Sabo's account on King Cobra's murder, also learns that the immortal Imu is from the Nerona family. This was revealed to us by none other than Ivankov, who studied the celestial past in great detail, likely during his time as a slave amongst them. However, out of nowhere, in the midst of their conversation, Kuma suddenly stands up, starts running, and teleports towards the red line. As Kuma climbs up and reaches Marijua, he is greeted by none other than Akainu, who tries to smoke his ass, but Kuma gets a chance to teleport away just in the nick of time. However, the real battle Akainu has to go through next will be none other than Monkey D. Dragon. But not before Dragon finally meets his son Monkey D. Luffy, as Kuma rushes towards his own daughter Bonnie in Egghead Island to save her from Gorosei Saturn. Dragon, along with his army, will make his move too here. After years of communication with Shaka, his involvement will come full circle, along with completing the thematic tie of family knots we will see in the final arc. But this will be met with the resistance of Akainu, who is the bane to any revolution or change, being the fiery dog of the Celestials. So just like his son is fighting an OG Admiral in Kizaru and his father Garp was fighting another one being Kuzan, Dragon will complete this trifecta by going head to head against Akainu. It would be very poetic to see two youngsters who were in the Marines together take up different paths through the tragedies they went through in life. Even the jumpstart to Dragon starting the Revolutionary Army officially happened due to Akainu's action of calling a buster call upon Ohara. So with each generation of Monkey D family fighting an Admiral, Dragon's links to being a Celestial, a former Marine, and having the same age as Akainu suggests their growth side by side, leading to their inevitable battle. Dragon's mission in life will finalize once the government topples and the Celestial Dragons are brought down to Earth and pay reparation to the people they caused harm. The government will go through a democratic change where kingdoms Dragon and Luffy saved throughout the story will be representative of it all. Sword will become the Neo Marines and finally govern the world through equal justice with no nobility above, nor oppression or racism. Subjugation would be that of the past. Only then the Dragon story will come to a fall as the new dawn rises. But if you want your One Piece knowledge to rise even higher, then check out the video on screen right now because it's another banger.